Chapter 2. Jasmine walked into the room and took her seat. The chairs on all sides of her were completely empty, with only 2 other people in the whole classroom designed to fit at least 35. She was very tired. Her dark brown eyes were trying to close themselves against her will, and she went to great effort to keep them open. It was her first class of her first semester of college. No way was she going to fall asleep in here. What would the teacher or the other students think of her? Her textbook sat in front of her, and she tried staring at the colors and design on it to keep herself awake. The abstract art and plain printed letters had seemed so advanced when she had first purchased her textbooks, and now they seemed so uninspiring, yet daunting and ominous at the same time. College-level English 101. Ugh. Not her favorite subject, but it was only her first year here in Heford Community College, so she figured she was going to have to go through the motions, especially since she had no idea what she wanted to do as a career yet. She had never liked school all that much. Her high school had been fun, but it was worlds away from where she was now. Now, she was living in the dorm right next to the college and would occasionally use her new laptop to video chat with her parents back home. But other than those occasional connections with her past life, she was in a new world altogether. It felt like a lifetime ago that she'd moved into her new room, when in reality she'd only been here for a little over a week. After the tearful goodbye from her parents, they had left here and demanded in their typical parental way that she contact them somehow every single day. Being the older of 2 girls, Jasmine knew that she would be missed, but also that all the affection would be passed on to her little sister, who was 5 years younger than she. At 14, Autumn needed all the attention Mr. and Mrs. Corzo could give her. At 19, Jasmine was more than old enough to take care of herself. At least, that's what she had thought the day she had moved into the HCC dorm across the street from the main campus. Moving away from home and from her entire family, being physically unable to see them at the beginning and end of every day, meant that she was completely on her own except for the calls back home. But she realized she wasn't really alone. She could drive the 6 hours across the vast open country to get back if she really had to. And it wasn't like her parents couldn't leave extra money in the joint account they shared as long as she needed it and they were financially able to transfer it. It was just the distance, not hearing Autumn's snores from off to her left as she lay awake, not being able to walk across the same house to see her father or hear the familiar voice of her mother poking her head into the room the 2 sisters shared and saying goodnight. This was what was so different. She was her own family entity now, and it was something new, freeing, but also a bit isolated at the same time. She took in a quick breath, realizing that she had been on the verge of dozing off entirely. What had woken her up had been the sound of markers on the whiteboard at the front of the room. She expected to see a teacher and a full class around her, but she was almost certain it hadn't been that long. She saw instead what looked like a student, though clearly not a freshman, writing something on the board. No, wait, not writing, underlining. He was underlining something that was already on the board, written in big red marker. English 101 at 8:30 has moved to room 356. Jasmine's eyes popped wide open. Her class was at 8:30. What time was it? She looked at her watch. Her heart leapt in panic and then sank with the realization that she would indeed be late to the first class on her first day. It was already 8:40. She looked very discreetly at the other 2 students, both of whom were wide awake and also staring at the board. "Oh, crap!" the boy said after the other student had left. "That's our class, isn't it?" the girl asked, sitting on the other side of the room from him. She turned to Jasmine to look at her, and Jasmine saw that she was one of those girls who must have been one of the most popular cheerleaders in her high school. Drat. She despised cheerleaders. I think so," Jasmine stuttered. The blonde's shoulders slumped, and she sighed, then reached for her backpack. "Well, I guess we'd better get moving if we want to get there on time," she said. "You go ahead," the brown-haired boy said with a glum yawn. "I'm not interested in being a late student." "We're all late students," the girls said cheerfully. "Trust me, I wasted my high school years and barely scraped by to get here, and I'm not about to let myself go back to those old habits." "I guess," the boy mumbled. "Come on," she said, looking at him keenly and with a hint of mischief. "If you come, you can sit next to me if there's an open seat." His head perked up, looking directly at her, and she winked at him. "You're trying to manipulate me," he said with a frown. "Yup," she admitted with a bright smile. "Now are you coming or not?" He let out an extremely exaggerated sigh. "Okay," and heavily stood to his feet, grabbing his bag very noisily. Jasmine stared at the two of them, admiring the blonde girl's attitude and wishing that she had the same confidence or foolishness to behave in such an outgoing way. But I have a secret they can never know, she thought. It was too risky. She would probably just head back to her dorm rather than risk coming in late and being the subject of scrutiny by her teacher. It wasn't good to let people examine her too closely, because then they might find out. "It's okay, sis," the blonde girl said, marching up to her. "We'll all go in. We college freshmen are at the bottom of the food chain anyway. Starting over from high school to crush our senior egos, we've got to stick together." Jasmine smiled and genuinely laughed at the blonde's misconception of her. "Ha! Well, I can't really say I was at the top of the food chain as a senior myself. I'd have been lucky to get the social presence of a sophomore." "Then today's your lucky day, girl," the blonde exulted. "You just got yourself a brother and sister in shared misery. What's your name? Wait, no, that's rude. I should introduce myself first. I'm Jenny Whitman. Nice to meet you both. You can call me Jenny, Jennifer, Jen, or whatever else makes you feel like we're friends." "I'm Nate," the boy said, speaking up from behind her. "Nate Grossman. You can call me Nate, Nathan, or Master." I answered to that last one fastest. Jasmine giggled. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. "I'm Jasmine Corzo. You can call me Jazz," Jenny blurted out. "That's perfect for you. You look like a Jazz." Thanks." "Welcome. It's true. Go look in the mirror tonight and you'll see I'm right." Jasmine laughed. It was the first of many laughs that she, Jenny, and Nate would share together. Jasmine stumbled into her dorm room later that night. Her stomach hurt from laughing so much, and she was exhausted. A full day of classes had been followed by the three of them returning to Jenny's room for an evening of board games, soft drinks, pizza, and watching movies. Halfway through, Jenny had insisted that she start on homework for the next day, and Jasmine had decided to join her. Nate had refused to participate out of some hyper-masculine sensibility, but ultimately he had felt guilty about watching his favorite flick while the girls were hard at work in math, and had joined them around the table that was crammed into Jenny's tiny dorm. By the time the night had come to a close, Nate had gotten about half as much work done as the two girls, but all three had shared an equal number of smiles. They had developed enough inside jokes in one evening of work and play to keep them close to one another for the next year at least. Jasmine had never been more relaxed around anyone outside of her family. Come to think of it, she had never even felt like this around her own family, not after she had discovered her telekinetic abilities. She had laughed so much, almost in tears at one point after Nate had said something so ridiculous she couldn't even remember it now that she was back at her dorm. The three of them had been drunk on humor, no alcohol involved whatsoever. She had never had friends like this before. "I suppose college won't be so bad," she thought as she fell onto her bed, exhausted. Her book bag plopped to the floor, her books spilling out all over the place. She gave a brief glance to make sure her binders weren't open with papers falling out, then decided that she was too tired to inspect them further, and instead allowed herself to drift off to sleep. She dreamed that she was moving into her dorm room once again. It was totally déjà vu, but of course when you're in the middle of a dream, you don't question even the strangest things. Her father was lugging her mini-fridge into her room, and Jasmine couldn't decide where it should go. Her mother was holding the family photo, calling for her assistance in choosing a spot on the bare walls that wasn't going to soon be covered with bookshelves, mirrors, or blocked by a desk. Autumn was carrying heavy stacks of books, her thin arms surprisingly strong in supporting the weight. The flurry of activity made Jasmine hungry. She opened the door to the fridge her father was holding and pulled one of the pudding cups out of it, reaching for a spoon in the open drawer. The chocolate was sweet on her tongue, and she finished the entire cup in just a few spoonfuls. Father was growing impatient. Making him stand there and hold the fridge was not kind. She directed her attention back to moving it into place, but then saw that Autumn had taken all the papers out of her binders and spread them all over the room. "No, Autumn!" Jasmine cried. "I needed those for homework tomorrow. I had them all right where I wanted them." Autumn gave her a sorrowful look, then proceeded to rearrange all the papers she had pulled out. Mother had set the family picture down and was now trying to find a place to plug in Jasmine's alarm clock. Father had found a place for the fridge and moved on to putting dishes in the dishwasher. "Jazz!" came a stark yell from the door. It was Jenny, standing in the doorframe, calling loudly for Jasmine's attention. "Jazz!" You in there?" Jasmine jerked awake. The moment she opened her eyes, she froze. All around her, things were hovering in the air. The heavy books were directly over her bed, along with the family portrait on top of them. Her binders, organized the last time she had closed her eyes, were all floating in a row in front of her, each page of paper taken out of them and closing over her and her books like a dome. When she froze, she felt her heart skip a beat, and she could barely breathe. The papers flew out in all directions. The binders dropped to the floor. The heavy stacks of books bounced off her bed at her feet. She barely had time to move her legs before the books landed on them, and onto the floor as well, and the picture of her family hit her in the head with a crack. She barely felt it. From the tiny sliver of a kitchen off to the right of her bedroom, Jasmine heard the horrific sound of dishes dropping out of the air, the delicate relics of her past life shattering as they hit the floor or struck the countertop. The room shook as her fridge slammed back down into place, having been held up so high it was almost touching the roof. "Whoa, Jazz!" Jenny's panicked yell was accompanied by the sound of her trying to turn the locked doorknob. "Jazz, say something!" "Don't come in," Jasmine gasped, barely able to react and trying madly to think of some excuse. I am not dressed." "Are you okay?" Jasmine scrambled off her bed, briefly glimpsing a dark brown stain on the floor, an open pudding cup, dropped with the rest of the stuff in her dorm room. "Jasmine! I'm okay. There had to be some way to explain this besides telling Jenny the truth. There was no way Jasmine would let her secret out to her brand new friend. She just made friends. She didn't want to lose them all in one day. They would think she was a freak, some sort of demon or cult worshiper or something. I slipped on some pudding I dropped. I dropped a bunch of stuff," Jasmine called, her voice shaking as she scrambled to pick up her papers and organize them. The pounding on the door and the frantic jiggling of the doorknob had stopped. "But you're okay, right?" "Yeah, I'm fine," Jasmine lied. She wasn't fine. She was scared out of her mind. Jenny was silent for a minute behind the door, and Jasmine paused, wondering if her friend had left. But Jenny's next sentence made Jasmine want to cry for lying to her new friend so terribly. "You forgot your English workbook in my room. I came to give it back to you." "Oh," Jasmine gasped, suddenly remembering that she hadn't seen her English workbook floating in front of her with the rest of her stuff. Thanks. Just slip it under the door and I'll get it." "Okay," Jenny replied. She proceeded to push the thin purple booklet through the crack under Jasmine's door, and then Jasmine heard her footsteps as she stood back and put her ear to the door. Do you need any help cleaning up? I can stay and help if you need me to." Jasmine swallowed the lump in her throat and fought back tears. No, I got it." Another pause from Jenny, then, "You sure?" Jasmine wanted to let her in, but she knew she just couldn't do it. It was hard enough lying to a faceless door. She wouldn't be able to bear lying to that sweet blonde girl face to face. "Yeah, it's okay," she said as convincingly as possible. "I'll clean all this up and then I want to go to bed. I'm really tired." At least that last part was true. "All right," Jenny said resignedly. "Well, I guess I'll see you tomorrow. We'll go back to my place tomorrow night if you want. We can have pizza again." Jasmine trembled. I don't know. I don't think I'll be able to make it." "Oh, don't say that, Jazz. We're friends. I'll see you tomorrow and we can hang out then." Jenny's cheerfulness even oozed from the sound of her footsteps down the hall. She wasn't going to take no for an answer that time. She has no idea, Jasmine thought angrily, her hot tears tracing lines down her puffy red cheeks as she wrestled with the broken picture frame and stared at the shards of her dishes. College is going to be terrible.